One of the most fascinating things I've ever seen is the fact that most people believe that they're limited without ever having any evidence as to the fact that they are. It goes in two ways. First, we have to actually have a definition and a clarity as to what an actual limitation is. And then we have to apply that limitation to explore our life with it and actually understand, am I limited? So most people live their entire life believing, acting, feeling, and therefore expressing with their limitations when they might not even actually have any. And now most people watching may say, well, of course I have a limitation. Look, I can only touch this object. I can't touch every object. I can only see from this point of view. I can't see from every point of view. But the question is, for example, you can also only read one book at a time. But does that mean you are limited because you can only read one word, one page at a time? That's not a limitation. That's actually just That's an intentionally created limitation for the purposes of enjoying a story. So if you're playing football and, technically speaking, you're not allowed to pick up the ball with your hands, does that mean you're limited because the rules of the game say that you can't touch the ball with your hands? Of course not. It's an intentionally created, purposeful limitation for the ability for you to enjoy the game. We have to understand, what is a limitation actually? And do I actually have one? Most people on the spiritual path, they never consider that. They just make the assumption that they have limitations without ever actually questioning what is a limitation, and if I had one, what would that look like on an actual level? Because me only being able to see from this point of view means this body is limited. But if I'm not this body, then I'm not limited. You see what I mean? So the question is, what is the one that we're referring to that would or wouldn't have these limitations? This is a fascinating thing to ask. Why wouldn't you ask this? You see, am I actually the one that is limited? Therefore, I must be essentially a set of eyes, ears, a mouth, and a nose. That must be what I am on an essential level. But you can take away your eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. You can take away your hands. You'll still be you. You see, you don't lose something essential to you when you close off and go to sleep. Most people think that they disappear when they go to sleep. No, your sense faculties disappear when you go to sleep. You don't disappear. Because if you disappeared when you went to sleep, you wouldn't even be able to render the fact you disappeared, because you'd have to be present in order to know you disappeared. So it's impossible to ever make a claim that when you go to sleep, you disappear, consciousness turns off, and you just vanish, because you'd have to see yourself vanish. And therefore, you'd have to be there prior and after the vanishing in order to say, yes, I can see I was there at that moment and I wasn't there at that moment. You'd have to be conscious of both sides. So in order to know you disappeared, you must be present in the disappearance, which means the disappearance wasn't the disappearance of you, it was the disappearance of experience. It was the disappearance of sense faculties. It was the disappearance of mind. So what does this mean for our experience? It means that we aren't actually shown a limitation. So the purposes of this video in its foundation is not necessarily to help you see that you're absolutely infinite. It's to make you see there's no actual evidence to suggest that you're limited. There's no proof. No one can prove that, and you can't even prove that to yourself. There's nothing in your experience that you can actually experience that proves that you're limited. Evidence suggests the proof. We can't even actually find evidence. So we want to be able to have the capacity to, instead of outsourcing our intellect, outsourcing our mind to somebody else, we want to develop the capacity to internalize what we would usually outsource to a teacher or a book or to some sort of guide. We want to adapt the creative process of these types of exploration and questioning and reasoning, and we want to internalize it so that we are able to explore our own experience to verify if there is an actual limitation. Because me saying to you, there's no limitation, doesn't mean anything to you. Because what if there is for you and there isn't for me, right? What if, anything could be mistaken, technically speaking. So the purposes of a guide, ideally, is to help you internalize the creative process of this contemplation. So you can see for yourself and verify for yourself that you don't have any. And the first way that you can do that is to explore what it means to have a limitation. To have a limitation means to be limited to something. So it's very easy to identify. If I have a limitation, I must depend on something else in order to exist. So a table depends on the wood in order to exist because the table is made of wood. No wood, no table. The ocean depends on water to exist because if there's no water, there's no ocean. So the question is, what do we depend on in order to exist? And is there something that exists that doesn't depend on anything else? Well, there would have to be. Because if something exists at all, something must be at the core of what exists. So that thing would have to be something that exists that doesn't depend on anything else, and that would be reality. So what we're questioning here is, in essence, am I reality, or is reality something beyond me? Is there reality and I'm separate from reality, and there's multiple realities, and I'm the limited reality, and there's a realer reality than me, and I'm not that at all, and I'm just like this kind of speck that's accidentally taken place somehow in one infinite reality? Or am I actually the same as that reality? Am I that reality experiencing itself? So we have to see, just because we experience limitations, it doesn't mean there are limitations to ourselves. There are limitations all the time. There are limitations when you go into someone's house and they ask you to take your shoes off. That's a limitation. You could walk in with your shoes on, but to respect the boundaries and the parameters of the house, we have these rules. They are limitations. They're purposeful, intentional limitations. So the question is, what limitations do we actually have? A limitation of our body is not a limitation of ourself, unless we believe ourselves to be the body. So if you believe yourself to be the body, you're going to be feeling like you're limited to your thoughts, your feelings, your perceptions. That isn't to say that if you didn't believe you were the body, that you would just start experiencing every other thought, feeling, and perception. No, it means you'd still have a point of view, but you would not experience being limited to that point of view. You wouldn't feel limited. You wouldn't live, therefore, with limited implications. So what we're trying to understand is, what am I limited by? What is it that I am that could be limited? On an essential level, what I am obviously doesn't start or stop and come and go because I've never experienced that. I can only verify based on my experience. I can't verify based on the fact that I've seen things come and go, because seeing things come and go is not the one that's seeing. The one that's seeing is obviously what I am, because that's verifiable by my experience. I can actually experience what I am is the one experiencing. There's nothing beyond the one experiencing, because beyond that, in order for that to exist, it would have to be experiencing the one experiencing, and therefore it would also be the one experiencing. It would be experiencing the one experiencing. So whatever I am doesn't start, doesn't stop, it doesn't come and go, because I've never actually had that experience. Even in deep sleep, I experience the cessation of my experience. I don't experience the cessation of myself. I know I had good sleep. I wake up when the alarm goes off, right? Because I'm already present and I don't disappear. My senses dissolve. My experience dissolves. My self does not dissolve. So what I am doesn't disappear. I can probably bet my eggs that that one that doesn't disappear, that is continuously here, that is aware of my experience, is more likely myself than the things that do disappear. So we want to get into this habit of not trying to come to this definitive answer. We want to stack the odds into a different basket. Which one are we more inclined to believe? And we want to base it on experience. So what happens is, over time, when we do these explorations, it becomes more and more obvious to us, like more and more obvious. We're not just trying to go, well, there's my answer, I'm done, I never do this contemplation again. No, because there's levels of conditioning of the mind that will reintroduce itself. And it's kind of basically like an untrained intellect will automatically go towards the reason and logic and model that it's learned already to build the world. And that world was built on separation. That intellect has created the belief that everything is separate. And you've lived that way, and it hasn't been fun. You've suffered the entire time. You've had a lack of love, a lack of connection, and only had love and connection in intermittent moments that then were stripped away from you and you were miserable again. So living the way you've lived, you have to, even if you know this is true, you have to like tell your mind this, because the mind is something that you obviously yet to integrate, the intellect, because 99% of people in this path are yet to integrate that, which is why they don't feel free, because they haven't allowed their understanding to move into their body, because the intellect holds it up here, keeps everything in this ethereal realm and doesn't let you actually move through. We want to get into the habit of making these questions more regularly, and to not try to grasp a definitive answer all the time. It's okay to come to your contemplation and to have no idea. That's one of the best outcomes, right? We don't want to get into this habit of like, I know, because knowing that you know is a form of ignorance. Because what happens is you cling to that knowledge, because within the next 10, 20 minutes, you're not going to know again, but you're going to remember that you knew. And that memory of knowing what you think you knew becomes the next thing that inhibits you from taking this new, fresh exploration again when you actually need to. Because in the next 20, 30 minutes, you're going to probably go back into the belief in separation again, which means you have to keep on reintroducing this way of thinking so that you can continually keep moving through, retraining the intellect that goes habitually into the separation mode and bring it back into curiosity, bring it back into not knowing. So it's okay to not know. Getting to the point where you don't know is it's the perfect place to be, because then you'll start having clarity. The clarity will be clear and you'll move on with your life and you'll move with freedom, and you'll start seeing these limitations aren't really limitations of you, they're limitations of the body-mind. And the minute you see that these limitations aren't limitations of you, that you are actually creating these intentional limitations in order to have an experience, just like we create the intentional limitations to enjoy a game or to read a book, you will realize you are not the one limited. And then the things that are limited, like the body, the mind, our thoughts and feelings, they express with unlimited qualities. So that which is unlimited, that which is infinite, is able to then express in through the things we call limited, and the limited things express with unlimited qualities: happiness, peace, joy, connection. You see? These are all unlimited. Something that is temporary, limited, and finite shouldn't be able to be happy at all. Something that is fundamentally limited should not be able to experience love. It shouldn't be possible. To be fundamentally limited means you have to be completely separate from reality, which means you can't have any connection to it. How can you have connection to something you're completely separate from? Of course you can't. You see? You can only have connection with something you're connected to. So you can't be therefore limited to this body if you're connected to everything else. So the reason people get stuck and keep looping over the same process of believing themselves to be separate, then remembering and going separate, is because we haven't actually trained the intellect we haven't trained ourselves, you could say, in one level, to question the same thing over and over again. We think that we question it once or twice and then that's it. We have one awakening and that's it. No, we have to kind of build this ability to step into curiosity. We have to adapt our ability to question with experiential reasoning. This is something that Atmananda Krishna called higher reasoning. And it's one of the most profound books where I actually learned this was his book Atma Darshan and Atma Nivritti. And these two books are profound. You can just find them on the internet. If you just Google them, PDF, it'll come up. You can also find them in the community. But one of the main things that I do, and one of the main things that I take clients through and people that I sit with, is to build this natural ability that we all have to simply be curious about what is going on, to be interested in our direct experience. Most people, they want to leave their direct experience. They want to go outside it. They think the freedom is beyond it, so they try to go beyond it. But you can't actually, it's almost like that you, in essence, are beyond experience, and that is where freedom is. However, when you are, you could say, tied to a body-mind, if you keep trying to exit experience on the level of experience, you keep recreating the separation, you see? which is why the path has to go into experience. You have to go into what you're experiencing and be curious about that. And that is how you will train the intellect to stop going into separation and to, you could say, cleanse the palate of the trauma of separation. So no longer will these traumas, they might not be big traumas, it could be any trauma, the trauma of like, it's just a latent pattern that your mind has kind of kept repeating. And once you kind of cleanse that, whenever you perceive objects, hear sounds, you stop recreating this belief in separation again. And obviously, the less you keep repeating that, the more you're going to naturally, over time, feel this freedom and feel that sense of peace and happiness as a natural baseline. I have a free community. The link is in the description if you'd like to join. I'd love to see you there. Have an amazing day. Take care.